She with the Cordia. Hello to you, friends, and welcome back to my channel. And Siobhán, the Celtic Empath here. And I'm coming to you from my cozy little house in a very wet and rainy Ireland again, which I took some more footage of. And I'm going to stick that on there to the front so you can have a look at all the lovely rain pouring down top of us today. So that has to be my intro. Because I'm Irish, I have to talk about the weather first. Just have to get that in there. I thought about sitting in my car today, actually, with the rain beating down top of me and doing this like a weekly vlog update. But anyway, I kind of thought maybe too casual. Would I get away with being too casual? I don't know. But maybe the next time I might try that. But anyways, how are you all keeping with the current, speaking of weather, the current atmosphere of change that's going on around us at the moment? It's quite heightened. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I feel like I almost want to entertain you a little bit and talk about something that's a bit lighthearted and off kind of the current subject a little bit. But I am going to make it all about me, because that's what happens sometimes when we start vlogging. We have an opportunity to be able to talk about things that matter to us, things that perhaps, that I think about, things that I get asked as well, things that people ask me or talk to me about, maybe through my sessions, through my healing sessions as a Aura and R.A.A.H practitioner, and also through my oracle reading sessions that I do with people. So what I want to talk about in the topic, of course, what I've called the video, is like what's in a name. Because this is kind of something I think for a good while I've been meaning to make like a bit of a vlog on. So what is in a name? What is a name? What does it mean? And I find like my name, the Celtic Empath, I want to kind of talk to that a little bit as to the choices around things that we call ourselves, like how and why we identify with certain things, or why we choose to call ourselves certain names, and what it is that we're saying about ourselves when we do describe, because we're describing ourselves when we get to choose a name, as opposed to what we're actually born with, a different name that's been chosen for us to a certain extent. But when I say about choosing a name, it becomes your identity, right? So like the Celtic Empath, because I have many different experiences of people who resonate with what I call myself or don't resonate with what I call myself. And there's a kind of like a checklist, kind of a judgment or an assessment, like various different things that happen, I notice, when people call me or refer to me or ask me about the Celtic Empath naming of myself. So it's kind of interesting, this like idea of identification that we have. And so we get to create a name if we're going to be creating a business, regardless of what the business is. It doesn't have to be in my area, my spiritual experience of a spiritual entrepreneurship, any sort of business that we're deciding to put ourselves into, that is going to be a brand as such for us, for the service we're offering. And we have to give it a name, don't we? Because the name is supposed to kind of tell people, hopefully inform people, maybe even as to what maybe the business is about, even that you can maybe tell certain things by the name. Maybe what it's in relation to, the work, the nature of the service, maybe a location, or, various different things. So there's this identity that's attached to it. And so when I was like deciding many years ago, when I was getting that push to, Spirit was saying, start getting yourself out there, start putting yourself up there on social media. This is a massive forum for all of us to be able to communicate with each other on a grand scale, an important way to communicate really important information. in so many ways and so many levels. And so it didn't really take an awful lot of thinking for me to come around eventually to describing myself as, well, the Celtic empath. And it comprises of two components, two parts. So there's the Celtic bit where, for me, that's the ancestral part. It's the past, the connection to something that's deeper inside of me, something that I'm kind of sometimes not always aware of or conscious of, but it's like a subliminal part of my DNA, ancestry, bloodline. It's even connected into my family. So, and of course that I'm Irish, I live in Ireland. And so it's kind of, there's like a natural inclination towards all things Celtic, with our history, with our art, maybe with our poetry, and with our ancient history. And these are all things that I'm very much interested in the past few years, is going into ancestry and ancient history. And so it kind of seemed quite natural to me that I might connect and resonate with an identity in order to try to express who I am, what I'm about, because there's this kind of like paring down that you have. Like, I felt that it had to express something about myself, to say something about who I am, what I'm about, and it has to help people be able to associate with the word or the name of who you are, what you're doing, and what you're about, so that people can have some idea if they're looking for what it is that you offer, what you're providing. So the word Celtic for me embodied a lot of various different things. And so I thought, right, that's a good one. I'll go with Celtic. So we have the past origins. And then I chose the word empath for many different reasons. And the empath word is really interesting because I get so many reactions, reflections, mirror reflections, questions, and judgments and criticism, and a mirroring and triggering that goes on for people when they connect to the word empath. And what I've realized is that a name is very personal. So we all like to kind of think that there's something maybe that's quite special and connected to ourselves personally, if whatever our name is, right? And we may not always know other people who go by the same name as us, not necessarily. And even if we do meet a friend or a family member that happens to have the same name as us, there's a kind of not an identification, but there's a connection that's made, I think, automatically, even with other people that might share the same name as us. And so again, it's about this kind of inherent human aspect of community and connection. So when I called myself an empath, for me, it wasn't about me claiming this personal space of I'm an empath. Whereas, when we claim a name, we're kind of taking a name, and this is I am called this such and such person. And we may be the only person in our lives, in our immediate experience, that may have this name. And, it can be exciting to us, or it can be not exciting. It can be polarizing if we think that someone else has the same name as us, because maybe we define ourselves a lot by our names. And I think we do generally as humans. We've identified a lot with the egoic self, and therefore our name is a big part of our identity as individuals. And what I feel, what I notice in reactions when I call myself the empath, I can feel some people really connecting with that, because they're like, oh yeah, an empath. And that maybe they like the word, maybe they don't really know what it means, but maybe it resonates on some level. They're like, oh, okay, an empath is someone who feels certain things, feels a lot, or has empathy. That can be one of the associations with it. there can be other triggering aspects where people are like, the empath, oh, well, like, I'm an empath too. So I get this reaction from people that can be quite almost, well, it's egoic, I suppose, and kind of a competitive sort of nature can enter into it. And so there's this claiming that goes on around the word empath. Now, I don't copyright the word empath. I don't lay claim to having full ownership when I call myself the Celtic empath. It's a universal word. There are many hundreds and thousands of people who are empaths in this world, and there's many of us in the past, I would say 5 years time frame, 7 to 5 years, who have really woken up to the empath disempowerment, the empath wounding, the empath experience, and the whole empath narcissist sort of information and world started to really open up in the past, maybe 7 years or more. But it really kind of took off in the past 5 years. And I think it's like hit a kind of a saturation point now, empathy and narcissism and an oversaturation. But at the same time, a lot of people who are within perhaps the New Age realms, working within spirituality, working within the holistic realms, may definitely have started their journey off with resonating. Part of the awakening process is actually discovering that, oh, well, I'm an empath. I really resonate with the word. I resonate with the meaning of it. And I resonate even more with the experience of what being an empath actually means when we look it up, when we read about it, when we investigate it and query, what does it mean to be an empath? And that's a good question. What does it mean to be an empath? Which is something I could answer another day. The empath for me, it encompassed a lot of different elements of the present. So there was a lot of self-discovery that went on in actually kind of defining this big part of an experience that I was experiencing. And then all of a sudden discovering empathy, or the word empath and empath, which is slightly different to just experiencing empathy. Being an empath is slightly more than that, where an empath is embodying empathy, but not necessarily being a pushover, not necessarily being somebody who has to walk around all the time feeling empathy for everything and everybody, and should always be speaking really nicely or behaving really nicely. And this is another element of complete misunderstanding and judgment that comes in from people who really do not understand what being an empath means. But in relation to the term of an empath, to me, the term just is a full embodiment word. It's about love, basically, and it is about like empathy. But love is powerful, love is strong, love is fierce, love is not, love is gentle, love is beautiful, and it's inspiring, and it's creative, and it's flowing, and love is melodic. Love is not something that stagnates. Love is not one thing. It's not just empathy. And so the embodiment of an empath is somebody who is an embodiment of all of the elements that bring love together, and can be holding this energy, this vibration, can channel this energy and vibration quite easily, because the other denser negative energies, which empaths are very prone and sensitive feeling, are very, very dense, because the empath is more open, more aware, more susceptible energetically to energies, to frequencies, to currents from other people, places, situations, from other living entities and beings, whether it's from animals to trees to crystals to stones in the ground, whatever it is. And so a lot of people identify as being an empath, and they not necessarily fully embody what an empath is, and have different expectations or ideas of what being an empath is supposed to be. And so I think that calling myself an empath, first of all, is not laying claim to the word. So I'm not the only empath in the village, which is the famous line from a particular comedy show from a British production. I'm not the only blah blah. I'm not going to say in the village, but I am not the only empath in the village. No copyright intended. And so it's polarizing sometimes when people say, so you call yourself the Celtic empath? And I'm like, yeah, I call myself the Celtic empath because I am an empath, but I'm not the only empath in the village. But this identification is that there's this polarizing, a triggering effect or mirroring effect that goes on. It's like almost kind of like, oh, you know, she can't be the only person that calls herself an empath. I meet other empathic people who they don't maybe call themselves an empath. They might call themselves other different names. And I went through the process of deciding, what do I call myself? And I love dragons, and sometimes on my older accounts when I was trying to figure things out, I had various different names, Celtic mists, Celtic fog. That was one of my names. Dragon's breath is another name that I go by. So these are various different things that I resonate with. I've seen, you know, other names around, like, you know, rainbow names and rainbow unicorns and like pixie dust, and like there's so many things we can call ourselves with, but what is the embodiment of what it is that we resonate with, and not to be afraid to say that, because foundationally for me, I could say I'm a dragon, and I could go by the name dragon, purple dragon or something, and that would be true for me to a certain extent, but it's not a full embodiment of all that I am uniquely, every element and fractal and component of me. Whereas the Celtic thing brings in so much for me in relation to, as I said, ancestry, blood, connection into the land, and connection to what came before me, that got me here, that put me here, that is me, that is my skin, my hair, my eyes, that is that DNA connection. And so all of that history that has come before me, incredible wealth of history. So that's the Celtic part. So with the empath part, I call myself the empath, but I'm not defined by that. I own it, but I'm not identified by it. I don't claim it as being singular, that I'm the only empath in the world now and nobody else can call themselves, go by that name, an empath. It's an embodiment, and for those people that feel triggered by that when I say it, it's an interesting situation to be in, because that's part of the old mirroring complexes. It's part of the Hioka part to my energy field, which is the Hioka empath, so the mirror. So as the Hioka, I'm always mirroring myself, situations to people. So if people meet me in that space where they don't like, when they hear that, oh, you call yourself the Celtic empath, well, I'm an empath too. So many times I've heard this, I'm an empath. And I'm like, well, that's great. I mean, we're, you know, a lot of us are empaths. So be that empath that you are, claim it and own it. And yeah, like embody it and step into it and understand it. Understand that, all of it, and the sense of community that I think that being an empath would hopefully actually bring, is a sense of community into everybody, women, men, children, whoever, that all identify or being born to this planet as being empaths. It's just a word at the end of the day. It's just a term, but it's a term that encompasses a lot of knowledge and information, but it's not a definition either. So we don't need to overly identify either with what we call ourselves. So I don't own or over-identify with calling myself the Celtic empath. I could just as easily unknow him tomorrow, change it all tomorrow, and I could end up sitting here next week calling myself like a dragon's breath. Yeah. What does it matter? What does it matter? But that's kind of the issue, the thing around being, like, who are we? Who are we? I suppose, in terms of like giving myself a name. The Celtic empath was a way to help to streamline identifying myself. It was a way to help other people to kind of decide whether or not they think, right, this is somebody I can resonate with, this is someone I'd like to work with, and maybe connect with the empath part, with the empath word for the, for the healing, the ultimate healing. And if you don't, you don't, and that's the way it goes. But that's kind of all I have to say on that. Be careful not to over-identify too much with anything that we decide to call ourselves. At the end of the day, it's all changeable. Nothing is fixed anyway. I'm sure that there are many Celtic empaths out there, amongst the tribe and amongst the public. So welcome all and everybody, especially to the world of empathy and this new world that we're actually stepping into, where we're bringing more empaths, which is just, a foundational name. It's a foundational place for us to start with. And this sense of belonging and understanding ourselves. And that's really, I think, what empathy kind of has played a big important role in when the term an empath was coined, was that it brought such a fuller understanding for so many people to understand who they are. And so it's interesting that people may have started a lot of their awakening process with the empath information and knowledge, and then progress out and move onward into calling themselves a different name, something that they really like feel in tune with or resonate with. If it's, like a bluebell flower, purple stardust, or, whatever it is, like the 7 rainbows and, celestial, all these beautiful words and names. And it's different for all of us that we may feel that there's a stronger part of our higher self, of our energy, that's actually speaking to us at any moment in our life. And that these words, how we call ourselves or go by or try to streamline ourselves or try to help ourselves to define ourselves, so that we have some sense of a grounding as to who we are and what it is that we're grounding into the earth, into ourselves, into our lives. And that's what it should be about. That is what, to me, it's about. It's about what I'm bringing in and what am I connecting to in this wholeness, this embodiment as a Celtic empath, someone who goes by the name of a Celtic empath. So what do you call yourself by? What do you resonate with? What is it that comes through to you that is, you feel like is an embodiment of where you are at right now? And like, as I say, in 5 years from now, I may very well be bored with calling myself the Celtic empath, and I may very well want to call myself something much simpler and much easier. And to be honest, I love my crystal here, labradorite, and I might just want to call myself something very simple, going off of the colors or the textures of something that I resonate so much with. But there's so many different elements and components to us, so that we're not like blocking ourselves in or trapping ourselves in either into an identity. So, if you're being triggered and mirrored by or mirroring going on by what someone else calls them, like that's a good time to kind of pause and kind of, that is an important part of reflection, to look and see why is that you're being triggered, why someone else would call themselves by a certain name. So I don't know if that was any helpful, or if that was like quite boring, or if you actually really needed to know that. But I think it's quite important. I wanted to just talk more so on a personal level, make a video that might be a bit more personal to help you get to know me a bit more, get to know a bit more what I'm about and who I'm about. And it's something I've been meaning to address for a long, long time, is the name, my name. And just to answer some people's responses and reactions to my name. So this may or may not have helped. This, could be very boring. If you actually did listen the whole way through to this, that's great. Thank you very much. And there'll be a lot more topics and interesting things to come up. So actually next week's video isn't going to be so much a vlog, but it's going to be something that I've been working on for a little while, that's been like manifesting in my mind. It's a video going to be around connected with ancient history. So I'm going to be doing a kind of a presentation and maybe a little bit of talking parts in the middle, but it's connected in with favorite thing of mine, which is ancient history of Ireland. It's very important because the ancient history is coming back into our present. So this is where my work is going, where it's developing, interweaving. So there's a lot more to come. There's a lot more that's growing and expanding as we further journey now into 2022. So I will be explaining more the connections to ancient history and what is coming together as a Shamanka, Irish Shamanka woman. Might even give you a little insight into what my own ancestry is a little bit, but the Irish ancestry is so important. And so I would really actually at this point, this is the point that I would really love and hope that I can start making my videos of more quality, bringing more information to you, detailed information, and to please, please, please share my historical videos around my ancient history when when I start publishing them. Because this information is so important and it needs to be shared. And the only way that can be done is by us actually sharing it, getting it out there by word of mouth. So just a heads up, it's going to be ancient history connected to Egypt and Ireland. So it's big. If you don't know kind of the older true history of Ireland, the true history that is actually being kept from us out of the history books, I'm going to be going a lot more into that. So next week I'm going to be tipping on the iceberg a little bit on that. So thank you for joining me, for listening, for coming this far. So this was just a little introduction as to who am I, Celtic Empath. Peace and blessings.